pass on to our next speaker, and that is Manuel Padilla. And the title of his talk is Contact-induced shifts in the encoding of motive in Basque. Please.
Добрый вечер, good evening. Can you hear me?
Almost no.
Almost no.
A bit. If it is possible, maybe you can speak louder or.
Can you hear me?
No.
Now?
Well, it's almost the same.
I don't know which is the problem. Perhaps now?
Yeah, it is a bit better, yeah.
Just a bit. And now I have to share my slides with you. Yes, can you see the slides?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. In this presentation, I will focus on two causal roles, the expression of cause and motive. Well, motive is usually termed as reason in literature. It's a type of volitional factor that makes the agent act. In everyday dictionaries, the definition is a reason for doing something. So the motive is something that moves the agent to act. Therefore, control and intentionality are definitory elements of motive. And I like this formulation by Natalia Zaika, who distinguishes two types of causal constructions, direct one and motive causal constructions. Well, let us consider some examples in English and Russian. Well, this is quite obvious that I will not comment on the etymology of the English preposition because, which includes the term cause. And if you look at the reason examples, there is a construction for the sake of something. And as far as I can understand, in Russian, motive will more or less correspond to the semantic scope of the preposition radi plus genitive. But I'm not sure whether these two examples are absolutely the same or not. Dat свою жизнь ради Родины или за Родину. Well, according to Luragi, motive or reason is an area of overlap of cause with purpose. And I must add that benefaction or beneficiary is also concerned by this overlap. Well, the point is that many Indo-European languages seem not to grammatically distinguish cause and motive, and neither does Standard Basque. However, we will see that this distinction is relevant insofar as different dialects have encoded these two roles differently. Well, this is well known. You know that Basque isn't isolated, but just in terms of genetic relations. It is quite the opposite if we consider contact phenomena. And although it is quite a small language, Basque exhibits a very high degree of fragmentation and variation. And the point is that the linguistic distance between Basque varieties can, in a big part, can be explained by contact with different Romance varieties. That is, different Romance languages have influenced different Basque dialects. And what I want to underline is that we need to look at Basque always considering these complex contact phenomena. So Western or Southern varieties have undergone intensive contact with Spanish or Castilian, and Northern or Eastern varieties have historically been under the influence of Gascon Occitan and later French. This is just a little reminder about the nature of Basque case marking. You may know that in Basque, case markers are postpositions that are attached to the whole noun phrase. They do not vary and convey just case information. Here you are, the paradigm of the case system of standard Basque. You can notice that many of these case markers are morphologically complex. That is, they grammaticalized as a result of agglutination. For instance, both the causal and the benefactive markers are grammaticalized upon the genitive marker rren. And something similar happens if you look at the bottom part of the table. You have the allative ra, and then three more case markers, the proximate, the terminative, and the destinative, which are formed upon the allative marker ra. Well, until now, the reconstruction of Proto-Basque has focused mostly on phonology and also in morphology. And there is very little research on the history of the evolution of the case system. And there are some papers, but almost always they consider morphophonological aspects or perhaps the etymology for a given case marker. But we do know that semantic change is the key to understand the evolution of any case system. Well, Basque has a causal marker, case marker, sorry, which is the morpheme gatik. And this case marker emerged as a calc or pattern borrowing from Latin. It's quite obvious that, sorry, you have in the basis the Basque noun gai, which means mother, and the ablative or prolative marker tik. And this fits very well in the Lakofian metaphor, causes are origins. This causal marker, gatik, is devoted to the expression of both cause and motive. In these two examples, you can see, first example illustrates the encoding of cause. Perhaps the English translation can help. You will be hated because of my name. And the second example is an instance of the encoding of motive. This is my blood, which is poured out for many. So you have the same case marker for both causal roles, cause and motive. Well, I tend to use this kind of examples because when you work with historical Basque, that means basically work with religious texts. Let's go ahead. Basque has also a benefactive case that exists in all dialects with different markers. And this is illustrated by the third example. Why not to put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elia? And up to now, this is a general portrait for general data of Basque. But if we descend into dialectal variation, and absolutely, if we dive into historical records, then this portrait becomes more and more complex. To begin with, in the old Western texts, we find an archaic postposition, rren, which express almost always motive. You have here 3 examples. Perhaps some of them, as the example number 6, are not that clear because, for example, you have in the example 6, both the motivational postposition rren and the causal marker gaiti expressing motive. Well, this is Western Basque, mainly Biscayan dialects. This old or archaic postposition, motivational postposition rren, has almost disappeared from historical Western Basque, And in my view, this is due to language contact with Spanish. This corresponds with the Spanish model because Spanish has just one preposition for the expression of cause and motive, apart from some complex locution. But well, this contact-induced explanation is necessarily speculative because this change took place before the historical period. It's just speculation. Well, in the opposite end of the Basque-speaking area, the easternmost varieties used to have a motivational construction with the word amoreagatik. And this word amoreagatik is a calque from Gascon Occitan. You have in Gascon the prepositional locution por amour de, which means for the sake of. It's always like that in historical Gascon, but today, por amour de also expresses the cause. In this example, lo centralo nuclear arresta il reactor por amour de la calor, because of the heat. Well, the point is that this motivational construction in Eastern Basque has also disappeared. And always in the French side of the Basque-speaking area, in this slide, you can see a very important shift in the encoding of motive from the causal marker to the benefactive marker. Well, examples number 8 and 9 are taken from two translations of the Gospel of Mark into the Laburdin dialect, which is the main literary tradition in the history of Basque. Example number 8 dates from the 16th century. And here you can see that motive is encoded by the causal marker gatic. The same fragment of the gospel is translated today, 10 years ago, with the benefactive marker. And moreover, this shift from causal to benefactive marker is also documented in the Suletin dialect, which is illustrated by the example number 10. Suletin is the other main literary tradition in the French side of the Basque country. Well, in my view, this shift in the encoding of motive from causal to benefactive markers is due to contact with French. You can see everywhere in France this kind of monuments for people who died pour la patrie, za rodinu, ili radi rodiny. Well, French has the preposition pour, and this preposition encodes both motive and beneficiary. And unlike my explanation of Western phenomena, which is mostly speculative, this evolution in the French side can be taken perfectly during the last 3-4 centuries in texts. What is more, the geographical spreading of this change follows the direction of the spreading of French language in the Basque provinces of the Kingdom of France. And here, I propose a table to synthesize all these phenomena, all these changes in the encoding of motive and cause. On the left, the left part of this table concerns Western Basque. The right side concerns Eastern Basque and modern Basque, Northern or Eastern Basque. The rows in the bottom represent the course of time from archaic to modern Basque on both sides of the geography. So we can figure out a convergence, for example, in Western Basque, the semantical distribution with 3 different markers for beneficiary, for motive, and for cause. This is my hypothesis for convergence with Spanish. This is simplified with just two markers, one for beneficiary and the other for causal roles. On the right part of the table, there were the two markers rren and gatik, which are basically today, no, we have the same markers in historical and modern Eastern Basque, but their internal semantic distribution has changed. And the ancient distribution corresponds to the one of Occitan or Gascon Occitan, and modern Eastern dialects show the same distribution of French. And finally, this is just a sketch of how would look a semantic map of causal roles in Basque. Here, there are lots of relations that have not been addressed in this talk because they are far beyond the scope of this presentation, and ultimately they concern almost the entire case system. And to sum up, this is just to remind, language contact is one of the main factors which have determined the evolution in the history of Basque. These context phenomena must be considered in their complexity. We need to look at different languages, different Romance varieties, influencing different Basque dialects. So in today's topic, in the South, contact with Spanish favored the convergence of the encodings of cause and motive. In the North, contact with French caused a shift in the encoding of motive from causal to benefactive markers. And the last point is just for Basque linguistics, because there is very, very little research on semantic change in the case system of Basque. And up to now, this is all. Thank you very much. Спасибо огромное.
Thank you very much, Manuel. We actually have plenty of time for questions and comments, almost 15 minutes. So are there any questions or comments, please?
Mark, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you. I think that some of the distinctions you made here are going to be helpful to me in some of my research. Let me ask, just to clarify and nail this down for me, what did you give an exact definition of motive, how we recognize what's a motive as opposed to some other kind of cause?
Mm-hmm. Well, I could not formulate better than Natalia Zaika, so...
I may have just missed it. Could you just repeat it?
Yes, well, both cause and motive are causal roles, but there's a tiny nuance or distinction between them. So cause or direct cause denotates an immediate causation relation between two situations, and motive implies a degree of volition, of control, because it's a reason that moves the agent to act. So we have a reason to do something.
And that reason probably means a conscious reason too, yes? Or...
Yes, there is consciousness, control, and volition.
Yep. So maybe we could get into some Freudian analysis here, but one of the things that I've wrestled with a little bit is looking at the kind of logophoric pronouns that I was talking about yesterday in sort of clausal adjuncts. I think I mostly just talked about them in sentential complements. But you can look at them in adjuncts too. And for purpose clause adjuncts, you can have a logophoric pronoun. In just simple time adverbs, you cannot. With causal adverbs, like, something like he bought the milk because he was thirsty.
Mhm.
Or he bought the milk because it was on sale or something like that. There you get a kind of a funny distribution. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it isn't. And I bet it has to do with your distinction of motive here, the distinction you're using about motive. And if we had this combined with the right thing of Basque, we would have that clear. If it was a cause that had no conscious part to it, you wouldn't have that kind of logophoric pronoun. But if it was a cause that had some reason to motive, in other words, it was a cause that the agent had in mind in deciding whether to do the action, then you can use this special kind of pronoun to refer to the agent. So I appreciate the distinction, and am going to be encouraged to look at my data with that more seriously, more carefully.
Thank you very much. But I would like to puntualize that it's not always easy to determine whether in a given example, in a given sentence, you have cause or motive, because sometimes it's really difficult to determine.
Yep.
And by the way, Russian speakers, is the same for you. Отдать жизнь, свою жизнь за родину или ради родины? Is the same exactly or not?
Well, if I may allow myself to answer, this is, well, it is a poor example because it's a fixed expression. So normally in this fixed expression, people normally say za. However, well, you can try and see other and it's za because mostly not because of the of Rodina, but because of a reason. Give one's life, sacrifice one's life for something or somebody. Normally, it's za, like I don't know, умереть за други своя, for one's friends. However, if
you can't say I'm doing that за родину. You can say I'm doing that ради родины, but
yes,
you die
you
за родину.
Indeed.
I see. So sorry, because
actually in the compositional meaning, za in Russian is normally a reward. It denotes a reward or some, well, something you get for what you do, but not the some sort of moral motive or something like that. But it must have been different in earlier Russian, from whence we get the за родину, отдать жизнь за что-то. Okay, are there any further questions or comments? Because if there aren't, then I actually have a question. Well, it's certainly a question of ignorance, but it is related, directly related to your talk, could you please say a few words about the sociolinguistic situation of the language contact of Basque with well, especially with Gascon, because while it is certainly interesting to well, what the extent of bilingualism between Basque and Gascon in these older times could be.
Well, there is a little research, but this is an extremely interesting topic. So we know that before the spreading of French in southern France, Gascon, or in general Occitan varieties, were a kind of lingua franca in southern, no, for Basque speakers. So the degree of bilingualism, well, we suppose that lots of Basque speakers were monolingual, but there have always been an amount of bilingual population, and French, as far as I know, began spreading in the Basque-speaking area from the 16th century onwards, perhaps 17th, but it's not, this spreading of French did not take place equally everywhere. It began from the coastal region where harbors, more economic activity, and the easternmost part remained less. So the knowledge of French spread in the easternmost corner of the country almost after revolution, almost in the 19th century. So we know that they used to be trilingual speakers in this province of Sul, which is just a valley, and it remained always elderly people who used to speak French, Gascon, and Basque, but they are the last one, and very old people. So the degree of bilingualism with Gascon, until the spreading of French, it was the main lingua franca to Basque in the Kingdom of France. And then, to put it simple, with the French Revolution, French substitutes Gascon. That is, always you need to look at the province. There is very, very little research.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
There is still time for one short question or one short comment. Okay, then we should perhaps thank our speaker once again.
Thank you very much.